Every gardener knows that fall is cleanup season, leaves pile up, stems dry out, and most people feel pressured to bag everything up or rush it to the compost heap. But there's a forgotten, incredibly effective technique that turns all that high-carbon material into next spring's engine of fertility without composting it in the traditional sense. This method doesn't rely on heat, flipping, or long curing times. Instead, it uses winter itself as the processing machine. I call it the leaf pit method, a seasonal, November-ready approach to uncomposting that guarantees a bigger, healthier, more resilient harvest. Begin by understanding that your soil needs seasonal oxygenation more than fast compost. Healthy soil relies on deep channels for air and moisture. When a bed becomes compacted, water stagnates, roots suffocate, and microorganisms slow to a crawl. Traditional composting creates great amendment material, but it doesn't address the structural issues below the surface. The leaf pit method solves that by creating underground pockets of trapped air and slow-decaying carbon. This isn't surface mulching or piling leaves atop a bed. It's burying fresh, whole, high-carbon materials in a trench or pit, so winter frost can fracture them and spring organisms can colonize them. The result is a soil profile full of spongy, moisture-retaining, oxygen-holding tunnels that roots eagerly explore. Choose one bed trench or pit to dedicate to the fall burial and dig deep enough to make room for a true winter breakdown. A typical trench should be about 12 to 16 inches deep and roughly the width of your spade. If you prefer a pit, think 2 to 3 feet wide and up to 18 inches deep. The design depends on your garden layout, but the principle stays the same. You're creating a seasonal vessel to be filled with carbon-rich material that nature will slowly process. If the soil is compacted or clay-heavy, you'll want to go for the deeper end of the range, so you create more room for expansion as the buried materials swell and contract during freeze-thaw cycles. Fill the trench with whole leaves and woody stems in a balanced ratio to maintain structure and long-term aeration. Because this method relies on slow, cold-weather decomposition, you want to avoid shredding the leaves. Whole leaves hold their shape longer. Layer them alongside woody stems, herb stalks, or small branches. A simple ratio that works exceptionally well is 2 parts whole leaves to 1 part woody stems. The stems prevent the leaves from matting, and the leaves provide the broad carbon mass that frost can penetrate. If you have tougher leaves like oak, magnolia, or sycamore, they're perfect for this. Softer leaves, such as maple or those from fruit trees, work too, but they'll benefit from a slightly higher ratio of woody material to help prevent compaction. Cover the leaf pit with the soil you dug out, and just allow winter to take over from there. Once the pit is filled, simply backfill with the original soil. There's no need to add compost, fertilizer, or any nitrogen amendments on top. The goal here isn't to compost the material quickly, but rather to allow it to collapse, settle, and fracture gradually beneath the soil line. Over winter, water seeps through the soil, saturates the buried carbon, and begins the slow microbial awakening. Frost expands the leaf layers, cracking them open. Thawing collapses them again, drawing soil downward into the gaps. This freeze-thaw cycle does the work of deep tilling without disturbing your garden ecosystem. Expect dramatic improvements in soil texture by early spring, especially in heavy or depleted beds. By March or April, the buried material will have begun collapsing into itself. If you dig a small inspection pocket at the pit's edge, you'll notice the leaves losing rigidity, the stems softening, and the surrounding soil becoming darker and more crumbly. You'll also notice something equally important. Spring moisture will linger in that area far longer than in untreated sections of the garden. That's because the decaying mass becomes a moisture reservoir, releasing water slowly as the season warms. This benefits shallow-rooted greens as well as deep feeders like tomatoes and squash once planted. So, you'll want to plant directly above the pit or trench, making sure not to disturb the interior at all. One of the biggest advantages of the leaf pit method is that it sets up next season's root zone with built-in oxygen and moisture channels. When you plant into the soil above the pit, roots naturally grow down into the soft, air-filled pockets created by the breaking leaves. A good example: if you buried a trench down the centre of a 4-foot bed, you can plant tomatoes about 12 inches to either side of that trench. Their roots will angle inward and eventually find the pit's aerated, nutrient-rich zone. For greens or herbs, simply plant them in a line directly above the buried material. The soil will be loose enough that young roots can penetrate quickly, you know. Use the leaf pit method as part of a yearly rotation to keep your soil alive. If you repeat this method every autumn, choosing a different bed or trench each year, your entire garden gradually becomes interlaced with these underground sponge zones. In beds that once dried out within hours of watering, moisture now remains evenly distributed through the soil column. In sandy beds, you gain long-term humus. In clay beds, you gain drainage and aeration. Every cycle adds resilience, really. Even better, because the process relies on seasonal weather, it works whether you have freezing winters or mild ones. The pace simply changes. The leaf pit method is, well, all about letting nature do the heavy lifting. No turning piles, no hauling compost, no battling matted leaf layers. You just take what would normally be seen as yard waste and, instead, convert it into a structural amendment that lasts for years and, honestly, feeds your spring garden exactly when it needs it most. High-carbon material is not the enemy. When it's buried at the right time and depth, it really becomes the heartbeat of a living soil bed. If you found this guide useful and you want more, deep and practical gardening strategies like this, make sure you subscribe to Gentle Herb Living and share this video with fellow growers who want to build stronger soil with less effort.